Howdy everybody, what's up? My name is Sabina. I'm the left-handed alchemist. I'm a human. I'm an artist. I'm a mystic. I'm a lady. I'm a freak. Not in the sheets. I'm just weird. I am making videos that are basically like journals for me to look back on one day and see how far I've come in life. It's something that I wish that I had started years ago. So alas, I'm starting them now because no better time to start than now. I am a cat person. I have my cup of coffee, my first one of the day. Cat person. I am a cat mom, a cat lady. I love my little kitty cats. Mine is probably sitting outside this room right now, wondering, why am I talking to him? He can't even get in here because I talk to him like that. And I'm sitting in my office amidst all of my shit. My husband's shit, but it's got to go somewhere. It might as well all pile up in one room instead of everywhere. Whatever. Can't even be mad. At least I have somewhere to sit and talk to you guys and sit and work. Over the last several years, I have been on a healing journey of sorts, and I've tried so many times to sit down and talk about this, but every time I do, it just feels like trauma dumping. And it doesn't feel good. It just kind of feels like reopening the wound and reliving it. And it's just not it. It's not the vibe. I'm not trying to put that energy out into the world. I don't think it's really helpful to consume trauma dump kind of content. It, in my experience, has been more harmful than helpful. So I just want to talk about a little bit of where I'm at now in relation to my healing journey. And mostly I want to talk about books and reading and the books that I've just finished that have kind of changed the way I navigate the world. I started healing in like 2016, 2017. I had this come to Jesus moment where I never actually came to Jesus, but I came to realize that I hated myself so deeply because there was a cycle of abuse in my family that was really, really close to narcissistic personality disorder. I do not necessarily believe that my family has NPD. However, I do know that because of addiction and because of abuse, addiction has been a cycle that has been repeated for a long time in my family line, and the traits of that are highly narcissistic. I really believed for a long time that there was just something inherently wrong with me. I was living with so much shame over me. But it turns out when you have a father who doesn't love you unconditionally, you can never really fully form into a fully formed human until you deconstruct that and you parent yourself a lot and you do a lot of fucking therapy and you get to a place where you can begin to use compassion instead of shame. I am at this place where it is now comfortable for me to extend my hand toward compassion. I still very much spend a lot of time in shame. However, I notice when it's happening and I can back myself out of it and extend myself towards compassion. So I can see where the switch has finally flipped, where I am more inclined towards compassion than I ever have been before. It's been great. As a result, I have had to really figure out who the hell I am. The thing about abuse, and when you have an abusive parent, is that you are not really allowed to form a sense of self. You are not allowed to be who you are because everything that you are is in relation to your abuser. You are constantly walking on eggshells. You are constantly trying to read the room, read the energy, be hyper vigilant towards this person to anticipate what they might need so that you can meet that need for them before they have to communicate about it so that you don't get your head chewed off by a raging beast. Yeah, I am somebody who was the black sheep of the family who, when somebody's being disrespectful, you are going to hear about it. If you're on your bullshit, I'm going to make a smart ass comment about it. Always have been this way. I think it's a superpower. I love this about myself. I love that I don't take people's shit. I'm a ball of fire. Sometimes I get burned by it, though. I've been learning how to contain it. You know, it is what it is. It's a process. I'm still young. The fire's still harsh, you know. The fire still rages within me sometimes, and I get burned every now and then. But, you know, it is a process. We extend the hand towards compassion, and we wrap ourselves in it. Love. Love. What would I do if I loved myself? Embodying that. So within this healing process and not having a sense of self for so long, I have, through this healing process, through the years, you know, it's been like a step by step, a little at a time thing. I have come to find who I truly am. I have come to begin at least the process of finding who I truly am, right? Like, I think that this will be something that I will uncover for the rest of my life. And I think that even people who had healthy upbringings are in the process of figuring out who they are with each new chapter that is presented in their life. It's not just something that people have to go through if they've been in abusive situations and are finding their sense of self for the first time. It's something that we all do collectively many times throughout our lives. As we grow and as we change and as we evolve, we have to figure out who we are as these different versions of ourselves, as these different, you know, and these new chapters that we're in life. And I would say over the last year, I have been on I'm gonna form hobbies. Through the process of finding who I am and finding my true self and like establishing a sense of self and building this like self-identity, I've come to realize a few things. One, you can't kill your ego. If you try and kill your ego, it's just gonna live in your shadow. Your ego is something that you use as a tool in this physical life to like build structure, and it can and should constantly be under review and dissolved and reformed in new ways as you grow. If you became too attached to your identity, as like in my instance, I became very attached to the identity of being an artist, of being a jeweler specifically. And I spent all of my time becoming this jeweler, becoming this like jewelry fabrication person who can make really cool things. And I was a little delusional about it, thinking that I was the best. Why is my stuff not selling out? Nobody knows how good I am, how great I am. But at the same time, I was doing nothing to really feed myself in other areas of my life. And I was only focusing on this one area of my life. Not even like taking into consideration that my romantic relationships were going well. I had friends at the time that I was like really just really over focused on jewelry and whatever. Like there was like a lot of things in my life that were going very well, but I couldn't see them because I was so hyper focused on being a jeweler and having it be expressed in a way that I thought was the most full form of this expression. Sold out shop updates, long client lists, like all of these things that I thought meant success, but in reality really meant nothing because I wasn't focusing on anything else going on in my life. I felt like I had no other forms of self-esteem but through what I was creating, and it put a lot of pressure on my creations. I decided to become self-employed for my jewelry. In 2018, I did craft fairs like every single weekend through August, September, October, November, December for 5 months straight, every single weekend. 1 to 2 to 3 different festivals every weekend. It was exhausting. I burnt myself out. I kept doing this cycle of like doing these shows every weekend, every year for the holiday. I would just burn myself out and it was not fun. And through this healing process, I realized I need to expand my horizons. I might need to put my jewelry stuff down for a little while in order to expand myself and figure out who I am and what I like. And I think it was really clumsy. It was like a super clumsy process for me because I was so bent on being the super successful jeweler that I didn't really know how to put it down. I didn't know how to flex any different kinds of muscles. And so a couple of times I tried to put the business down. I worked for a different jeweler to keep my skills sharp and make money so that I didn't have to worry about constantly hustling and selling. And then the whole time I'm doing that, I'm wondering, why is nothing selling? I'm not promoting it. I'm not doing any kind of like marketing. I'm not really even making that much stuff, but I'm wondering, why is the jewelry that I have on hand not selling? And never at any point am I actually putting it down and letting this death process that needed to happen around my business happen. It was just this constant grip. And if I'm being honest, to this day, I still feel like I haven't allowed what needs to die to really fully die. It's been this like drawn out, slow, painful death that every time I pull cards, like tarot cards around it, I'm pulling death cards, 6 of Swords, death, like physical death, like these like other oracle cards that I have too that indicate like it's time to let the thing die a little bit. And I think that at first the process of letting it die scared me because I didn't really want to give it up. I didn't want it to be something that I never did again. First of all, I invested so much time, money, and energy into learning this trade that it felt like a waste. But once I realized that it wouldn't be a waste, that if I did decide to never make jewelry again, this whole process of running this business and making jewelry and like learning these skills would be valuable with whatever I do next. I know that at the core of my being, I'm an artist. I've been an artist since I was this big. Literally, from the moment that I could pick up a pen and pencil, I have this visceral memory of drawing. We have one of those like Playmate or Play something like plastic picnic tables that kids have. Like it had like purple and green seats and like a gray top. That's what I'm remembering from my little kid brain. Fisher Price picnic table. And I remember scribbling on that being like, I want to be an artist when I grow up. And then obviously things change because, you know, you hear you're supposed to be a doctor when you grow up. And then it's like, well, physical therapy is where all the money's at. So that's what I want to be when I grow up. But then I came back to it in high school. I took my first art class, my freshman year of high school. Sold my first piece of art ever for $5. It was a paper mache lion mask. Sold it to one of the other art teachers in the building. And from that moment on, I knew, oh, I just proved to myself I can make money doing this. This is what I'm going to do. And it just like felt like me returning to myself. So with that being said, even if I don't end up making jewelry for the rest of my life, I will be an artist in some capacity. So whatever I learned during this phase of my life, I can take with me into the next. And with that permission, I allowed myself to expand and allowed myself to do other things and try something new. At Christmas in 2020, my husband got me a rug tufting gun. And at the time, I was super excited. I had seen them on TikTok. They looked like so much fun. But I was also very poor. And it turns out wool for rug tufting is super expensive. And so I made one rug with the materials that he bought me, but I went through that pretty fast. And I started to buy this acrylic yarn, but something about the way that it felt didn't feel like good to me. I had a really hard time using the machine. The materials ended up being pretty expensive, and I just got really overwhelmed by the whole thing. I'm not going to say that I won't return to it eventually. I have all the materials in my closet. I would love to make a rug for my home one day, like a big one for my living room, and more, you know, whatever. I have ideas for what would be really beautiful rugs, but with the materials that I bought for rug tufting, I had all this acrylic yarn, and I decided one day, I'm gonna learn how to crochet. Like, I have to. I had this, like, it was like a dog on a bone, like this idea of like, I'm just gonna learn how to crochet. And I started to learn how to crochet, and I made all these granny squares, and I made all this crap that was like bad, like didn't know how to read patterns, would do these granny square like patterns and do them wrong. So I ended up making like a ton of these like just bad granny squares that I ended up throwing away. But through the process, I learned about mosaic crochet. Are you kidding me? Let me see, like I'll insert a picture. Mosaic crochet. It's stunning. It comes from like Northern Europe. Really thick, like when you finish it, it's really thick. I did a whole blanket, did a rug for under my coffee table. I was so obsessed, and it felt like, wow, okay, I'm expanding myself by doing this. I'm allowing myself, first of all, to do something new. I'm allowing myself to have a hobby. It's a creative hobby. I'm still creating something, but it still counts because while doing this, fibers arts, I also returned to knitting. My grandmother taught me how to knit years and years ago. She got me like a whole knitting needle kit, like the super nice clover wood bamboo, changeable knitting needles with all of the different loops and all the different sizes. She got that for me forever ago, like in high school. Maybe it's when I was like a sophomore or junior in high school. And so I had a little bit of experience knitting, but it was always something where I would like knit a couple hats around Christmas time and like forget about it for a couple years. But this just felt so different because for the first time, I found a creative outlet that I could do that was fully just for me. This thing that I could do just to fill my own cup, because with my creative spirit and my creative energy, I have found ways to monetize almost everything that I do. With jewelry, made a business out of it. Ceramics, made a business out of it. With painting, made things that I could put other things in to make a business out of it. And just constantly having so much pressure on everything that I was creating was not great for my creative energy. I have a large capacity to hold creative energy. That's something that I really was able to access last year when I did the Artist's Way. I was able to really feel into this reality and this truth within myself that I have a raging river of creative energy and creative potential at my fingertips whenever I'm ready to utilize it. It's just the channeling it and directing it that has been difficult for me because of the pressure that I've put on myself to monetize everything that I do. We live in a world where we have no choice but to monetize what we do because capitalism is a thing. People want to consume what we have, which is great. Like, it brings me no greater joy than for people to consume what I create because they're having a relationship with it. Like, the things that I create are to be consumed for the most part, but the pressure to sell it so that I can make money, so that I can buy food, so that I can pay rent, so that I can survive became so much. And when I was living by myself from the ages of like 22, 23 to 26, I felt that pressure exponentially because I refused to get a real job. I tried so many times to get a real job, but I have the kind of neurodivergence that just like doesn't take being told what to do very well. And so having real jobs just never really worked for me. I like having open availability. I value my time more than I value anything else. So therefore, having to go to work for somebody to do something that I don't want to do didn't really work out for me. So I made the choice to be poor and not have a lot of money over having no time, basically, to do whatever I wanted. So I would spend all my time creating things that I could sell to turn into money to survive. And with knitting and crocheting, I found for the first time something that wasn't realistic for me to sell. I made a blanket last year that I would have to sell for $5,000. An acrylic blanket. Like, the fibers aren't even that nice. An acrylic blanket that I spent so much time and energy on that in order to make a profit from, I would have to sell it for $5,000. And so I'm not saying that I couldn't do that. I'm not saying that there's not a client out there who would want my blanket for $5,000. I'm saying that I don't want to sell a blanket that I spent so much time and energy on at all. I finally found something that was for me. And same with knitting. When my grandma passed in March, it felt like knitting became the way that I spent time with her because she was a knitter. She would knit these like roll-up hats. They were ugly ass hats, but she would knit one every single day, one or multiples of them every single day. She got so fast at them that she would just have hundreds of hats sitting around that she would end up donating or giving to us or whatever. But by the end of her life, the woman had knitted maybe thousands of hats. I mean, I don't even think that that's like an understatement. She was a knitter. So in order to spend time with her while I was in like the heaviness of my grief over her passing, I would knit. And it felt like I was beginning to create hobbies for myself. I was beginning to create this separation of identity where I am more than just what my business has to offer. I'm more than just the jewelry that I create. I'm more than what I have to offer to other people. And through knitting and crocheting, I think I really started to establish to myself that I am worth having hobbies for. And having hobbies is fun. It's fun to not be thinking about how I'm going to make money with what I'm making all the time. And it's great. I've loved it. Another hobby I developed last year was reading. I know, reading. It's so simple. A lot of us have been doing it for a long time. However, did you know that most Americans don't even read 2 books a year? Did you know that over 50% of Americans are effectively illiterate? It's no judgment because the schooling system has failed us. The schooling system has failed us if that is the case. And it's not a moral thing for anybody who is unable to read. It just is what it is. But it just blew my mind. That statistic was crazy to me. And I'll be honest, when I graduated from college, I didn't really read that much. It was, I think, 2 or 3 years ago that I really started to put on my New Year's resolution list, like, I want to read more. And so I started to look into different resources, because books are kind of expensive. If you're just going to like go and buy all the books that you ever want to read, like, you're going to be spending a lot of money. And like I had mentioned before, I was at a place in my life where I just like wasn't making a lot of money. And so I found the library. I know, crazy. I found the library. The Phoenix Public Library is really thorough. It's really big. They have a huge catalog of books. You can physically go into many different branches and get the books if you like reading physically. However, I like reading on my Kindle. I love it. I love reading on my Kindle. I found out that I could read for free. I could read through the Kindle app on my phone with a resource that I already had. I have since been able to acquire a Kindle. My brother bought me one last year. Great. I love my Kindle. I use it every single day. It's actually sitting right here. I'm reading a book on it right now. Crescent City 3 of House of Flame and Shadow. Anyway, I learned that through the Libby app, you can take your library card and your library number, and you can put it into that app and access a catalog of books online, and just have like endless access to ebooks and audiobooks through these resources. And through that, I started to read more. I listened to ACOTAR. I'll be honest, I'm an ACOTAR girl. I like Sarah J. Maas. I'm not even going to pretend like I'm guilty of it. You know, people are critical of her. Maybe justly. I don't know. I thoroughly enjoy her books. I listened to ACOTAR on audiobook. Great time. I loved it. And then I started looking into her other catalog. I read Crescent City 1 and 2 last year, about this time last year. I remember reading it when the Super Bowl was playing. And then I read the entirety of Throne of Glass in like 2 months. 5,000 pages in 2 months. I became obsessed. Something about the way Sarah J. Maas writes is not big brain. I'll be honest. They're not big brain books. But they are so fun. They are so thoroughly enjoyable that it made reading fun again. It made it feel like it wasn't a chore. In high school, I had a teacher who shamed you for reading books like Harry Potter or fiction books, like fun books, because they weren't big brain enough. She really pushed like Ayn Rand. Are you kidding me? But she had my dumb 16-year-old brain convinced that if I wasn't reading big brain books, I was wasting my time. I was wasting my brain space. And so I go to college. I'm an art major, but I took a lot of art history classes. I loved it. I loved learning about art history. And with that was a lot of reading. So much reading. History. Who knew? All the reading. Boring. Very boring. So I would only read art history books because it was for school. It didn't leave me with much time to enjoy reading. I didn't want to read, truthfully, for fun, because I was doing so much reading for school that when I was not reading, I was probably doing art projects and working on other homework or hanging out with people. And then I graduate college, and I'm still kind of in this space where I'm convinced that I can't read for fun because it's not big brain enough. So I go on this rabbit hole of reading a lot of nonfiction, learning about business stuff and spirituality. And then I have this spiritual awakening. It's fun. Don't get me wrong. Like, there's a lot of fun to a spiritual awakening, but I was just like stuck on the nonfiction train for so long, and I'd read these heavy, dense conceptual books like Carl Jung and different concepts of Buddhism and different Eastern religions and philosophies, because at this point in my life, I had only really ever had access to Christianity and like gross, like evangelical Christianity, like the not fun, crusty, if you're not this way, you're probably going to die in eternal fire forever, you know, just like not fun, not like uplifting, not really like rooted in like what Jesus was teaching people. So I was like, oh, reading's boring. I decided, okay, I'm going to start reading again. And honestly, like the first couple years I would read like 15, 16, 17 books. And they were all these like really heavy, dense, like philosophical books because I thought that's what I was supposed to be reading. And then I discovered Sarah J. Maas. And yeah, I've read every single one of her books. I think I have like 400 pages left of this new one that came out. I'll get to how we got there in a minute. And it, for the first time in so long, brought me back to this place where reading was fun. Where when I was a kid, I would read books because they were just fun, and I would become obsessed with these books. I remember reading Pendragon, I don't even remember. It was about this kid who would like could go through these portals and go to these different worlds to like defeat this bad guy. I ate that shit up. I read Twilight, I read all the Harry Potter books, and I was just like hungry for books at this one when I was like in middle school and high school. I loved it. It was so much fun. It was a fun escape from the torture and abuse that I was, you know, experiencing as a kid. Torture is a little, we weren't being physically harmed. It was all mental, you know? It's so crazy how I'm like, my dad never hit us, but he emotionally tortured us for years. But that's better somehow. I will never be able to form healthy relationships, but at least my dad didn't hit me. I'm just kidding. I will be able to form healthy relationships, but I know that the tendrils of complex post-traumatic stress disorder might be something that I have to deal with until the day I die. Thanks, Dad! Anyway, if you ever see this, you know what you have to do to have a relationship with me, so that's not on me. I learned how to read again, and I learned how to read for fun. And that brings me to where we are now. Last year, I read Throne of Glass, the whole series, like I've already mentioned. It became my Roman Empire. I read it on my Kindle. I was obsessed. I had to buy all the physical copies. Got that for Christmas. And then I was like, well, I listened to ACOTAR. I might as well read them. Yeah, they were great. Loved it. Crescent City. Loved it. And then I'm finding myself on Book Talk. Crazy place that is. Wow. What I've learned about both crochet talk and yarn talk and book talk is that everybody's going to be convincing you to buy something. Everybody is convincing you to buy something. That's just kind of the culture we live in, where everybody all the time is like, you need this. Here are the next books that you need to buy. You should buy this yarn because it's soft or whatever. Yarn haul, and then it's like $500 of yarn to fill this like bookcase that's behind them that they like never are going to use all the yarn for. And what I learned with knitting is I'm only allowed to buy the yarn for the project that I'm working on or for the project that I'm starting. Like if I get too ahead of myself and just buy yarn because it's pretty, I'm never going to use it. It has to be very intentional. So I've like made myself only have enough yarn to fit in like one big Rubbermaid that can fit next to my couch. And I'm not allowed to buy more until I finish a project and I'm starting the next one. Like it has been a rule that, while overwhelming at times because yarn is pretty and soft, has helped first of all, my wallet. And second of all, just this overwhelming urge to consume and have more than I need, because it's honestly more overwhelming to have more than I need and to be sitting there looking at this yarn that I don't know what to do with because I don't have a plan for it. I don't have enough for this. Oh, it's too much for that. Oh, it's this kind of fiber, so I can't wash it this way, blah, blah, blah. I can't do it. And I think books are really similar, where we can get in this trap of like having a mile-long TBR, where we have all these books that we've bought that we're never going to read. So what I've tried to do is only have a couple of books ahead of time. I have all of the books that I haven't read in my like physical library in a pile so I can see them. And I have this rule, like I have to read one of those before I'm allowed to buy something new, or I have to read like a library book before I'm allowed to like buy a new book. I don't know. I'm just trying to like only buy the next book that I'm going to read when I need to start reading it, so that I don't have too many books in my collection. It's great. Reading all of these stories has made me think lots of different things. So first of all, when I started Throne of Glass, I was still very much in the grief of losing my grandmother. I needed a fantasy world to escape into that featured strong female characters and themes of unconditional love and overcoming darkness and, you know, the things that Throne of Glass portray. Like Aelin, while she is a complete bitch, she is me in many regards, and that fire, like that fiery spirit, is everything that I've wanted to be able to reveal to the world, that I keep hidden within me because I am ashamed to be so bold, you know? being out in public and being loud and proud, holy cow, but in the safety of my own home, loud and proud, you know. So she kind of helped me see who I could become in many ways. And through this, like through having read the series and it becoming my Roman Empire for many months, I have realized the impact of story and why storytellers are the true world builders. Storytellers are the people who not only help us like secure our history and help us understand our history and keep our history evolving and relevant, we're also using storytellers as a way to craft worlds. This is just a fantasy series that I read. Sarah J. Maas is just writing fantasy at the like surface level, but she's also telling stories about archetypes that help us find things within us that need to be unlocked so that we can express them in the real world. If I ask myself every morning, what would Aylin do? And I acted in such a way, my life would be different than if I wasn't doing that. If I didn't have the experience of getting to spend so much time with these characters. And so it really helps me understand that the way that stories are is so important for creating a better world. We find ourselves at this time between things. You know, COVID helped tear down a lot of old structures that are still in the process of crumbling. A lot of people are no longer so sensitive to propaganda. A lot of people are seeing like the way we've been treated by our government and the way we're being poisoned and the way that media has helped perpetuate really harmful stereotypes. Like, I don't know. And I see this return to reading as a return to myth. Like, how is the contemporary stories that we're reading now, how will they be the myths of 2,000 years from now? Because think about it like this. The people who are writing the Bible, they weren't like history writing. You know, it's not like historical writing. A lot of it is prose. A lot of it is poetry. A lot of it is this like really abstract literature in an attempt to understand the divine. Like, people have been trying to understand the divine for thousands of years. And it has been gathered and canonized as the Old and the New Testament as far as like evangelical and Christian like canon, you know. The Jewish people are using Torah, but they're also using like Tanakh and Talmud and, you know, I'm probably saying that wrong. I'm sorry, but I'm doing my best. They're using like many different historical myths and like books of myths to try and understand God and trying to understand people. And our Western society likes everything to be like clean, factual history textbook. So in saying that the Bible is a myth, a book of myths and stories, is going to be offensive for some of you. And I'm really sorry. I'm not trying to do anything personal here, but I'm not a Christian. I don't have a personal stake in this, so I'm just going to speak freely. I see it as a book of myths. Myths that are not always entirely factually true, but have deep, profound meaning and impact for millions of people around the world. People who study these stories and read these stories and contemplate these stories and meditate on these stories as a way to find God within them and in the world around them. And that's totally valid. It's totally valid. And it shapes the way the world works today. And what I'm contemplating is, how do the stories that we read that are contemporary, like the fiction books that we consume, how do they change the way that we see the world? How are they shaping the way that we have a relationship with ourselves and the divine and the world around us? And I don't think that the Bible has to be factually true to be valid, to have validity and meaning and impact and all of these like positive, beautiful things that it is in people's lives. Same way that a fiction book, that like these fantasy series that I read and that a lot of people read in different fantasy series, like whatever it is that you're reading, is technically fiction. So it's not real, but it's helping you imagine a new world. It's helping you imagine something different. And the imagination space is so directly connected to the physical reality and the physical spaces that we take up that it really does impact, like, the way that you fantasize about things impacts your reality. What you can see in your fantasy is something that you can create in your reality. And through, I think, stoking that fantasy flame, you're able to have a better time having more diversity and seeing different people's perspectives and really understanding a world where, like, liberation and compassion and true freedom is a possibility through being able to imagine it and seeing stories where these things are being realized. You can see how this was done in this fantastical world. Maybe the laws of nature aren't quite the same. Like, we don't have the same magic systems as a lot of these books do. However, we do have magic in this real life that is so directly connected to this imagination space that when you are fantasizing and you're spending time in these fantastical worlds, you are actually using the magic that is available in this reality now to create something bigger, to create something more. And I think that's really beautiful. Like, the stories and the media that we consume affect us so deeply with how we see the world around us. And that is why it is absolutely imperative that we read diverse authors. It's one thing, like, you're allowed to enjoy white authors. You are. Like, there's nothing that says that you're not allowed to enjoy the books written by white men and women. However, white men and women have a limited perspective of the world around them, especially if they're raised in America. We, privilege one way of seeing the world. Not inherently bad. Having privilege is not inherently bad. But when you expand your reading past just what you know, you are stretching yourself to see the world differently, to expand that fantasy world that you've been creating, to realize something different in your own life, to have multiple perspectives. It's important that, like, when we are reading stories, to understand that, like, everything's allowed to be criticized while also having value. Like, I'm thinking, like, Harry Potter. Like, J.K. Rowling has kind of shot herself in the foot in many ways, being a TERF and reading literature that is, like, very pro-cop in nature. Not my favorite. I don't consume a lot of her media anymore, but there was a period of time where I was really into Harry Potter and loved the story. And honestly, there's still part of me that, like, has such a deep nostalgia for it, that when I think about it, it's really rooted in, like, friendship. The story is like a story of light versus dark and overcoming challenges and the power of teamwork and the power of friendship and unconditional love and magic, like helping people access their magic again and fantasize about a world where magic exists. Like, those were all huge positives that book impacted the world with. All of the criticisms that come along with it are completely valid and need to be looked at and need to be voiced and need to be addressed. However, the positives are also there and help us with the fantasy world that we build. I recently read Manacled. That destroyed the fuck out of me. And it has me thinking about how emotions come into play with all of this. Manacled is a Hermione Draco fanfic. I'm going to spoil it a little bit here. So if you have not read it yet, maybe fast forward. But it is a fan fiction based around basically like The Handmaid's Tale meets Harry Potter. Imagine that Harry Potter did not win. Lord Voldemort won and killed Harry and all of his friends. And Hermione somehow got captured and is now in this, like, Handmaid's Tale situation. Draco is her keeper. And it's really emotional because we find out the first part of the book, it's 3 different parts. The first part is Hermione going to Draco's home. She doesn't, like, she's, like, emotional. She wants to kill Draco. It's, like, it's a bad time. She's being assaulted in the name of, like, trying to repopulate the wizarding world. And she has these memories that nobody can gain access to. She can't understand where they came from or what they are. She just knows she doesn't have access to them. through different forms of magic, Voldemort and Draco are trying to like break into these memories to like gain access to them so that maybe they can like take down the rest of the order. Part 2, you realize that Draco and Hermione have had this like relationship, that Draco had turned after his mother's death at the hand of Lord Voldemort, turned and was now like this double agent. So not only was he working as a Death Eater, he is also like the liaison for the Order, and giving the Order of the Phoenix information to do raids and to help people and like help hopefully bring down Lord Voldemort. Through this process, Draco and Hermione fall in love. It's pain. It's angsty, deep, heartbreaking pain through the whole thing, because so much of what happens in the first part is echoed in the second part. Things that Draco says, things that Hermione does, doesn't remember, but I don't know how to describe it. It's like you almost have to read it once and then go back and reread it again. But it's so emotionally tormenting. It's so painful. And I don't know how to describe it. It's like, you know, when you read something that's really angsty, or you watch a TV show that's really angsty, and you get that kind of like fluttery heart pain, like, I don't know. That's what it's like the whole time. Because the way that Shilin Yu, the author of this fan fiction, writes it, she speaks so clearly to grief and to loneliness and the impact of the two on a person and the way they navigate the world and the emotions that come up with grief. Like, having gone through my own healing journey recently, I realized that so much of the emotions that came up during the heaviness of all of that was grief. The weight that I was carrying was this grief that I had not let myself truly feel and like be in. And so through healing, I allowed myself to feel this grief. And so much of it for me came through the heart space, feeling like I had these little holes in my heart that through the pain that I had experienced, like, had been poked there. But through healing, I could feel them closing. But it was like this physical, almost physical pain, where it wasn't actually physical, but it was like an emotional pain that felt physical. It was very much a callback to that while I was reading this book. Like, my heart felt like it was ripping open so many times throughout the course of this book. And then in the last part, Hermione has her memory. She remembers that her and Draco are in love, and she's in this sticky situation where she's like, oh my God, I gotta get out of here. And eventually they get free and like go and live the rest of their life like secluded on an island. And I have so many critiques and so many good things to say about it, because on one hand, the way that it made me feel the whole time I was reading it was so intense, so heavy, so much heartbreak, so much pain, that honestly, through the process of reading this, I, like, in my real life, was grieving. I was crying. I was like having heavy emotions, feeling a lot of anger, just feeling a lot of pain that I think that this book was helping to bring up. And it makes me think, am I reading these kinds of sad books? Like, when I'm reading this, is it me opening something that wasn't supposed to be open in the first place? Like, reading heartbreaking material and being in this grief, is it something that I'm doing to myself, or is it something that I'm allowing myself to feel through the permission of reading this book? You know what I'm saying? Like, my heart has been through a lot. I've felt so much heartbreak, so much heart pain through healing it, that honestly, opening this wound up felt like airing it out. It felt like feeling the grief around being lonely in a way that maybe has been there underneath the surface this whole time, that through reading this book and having these words written and speaking directly to maybe what I was feeling gave me the permission to actually finish releasing and feeling. In the third section, or in the third part of this book, I cried every time I would read it. Like, when Draco was talking about how Narcissa was tortured by Lord Voldemort and how she wouldn't talk to anybody, and she was talking to this portrait of her from when she was younger, and how they would only talk to each other, and like this portrait had witnessed the entire torture that Narcissa had gone through. Like, something about that broke me. Like, even thinking about it right now kind of feels like it's gonna break me. But the way that I felt when I was reading it felt like somebody had finally spoken to the depth of pain that comes from abuse, that comes in the aftermath of it, because it's one thing to be in it and to be surviving. Like, we are creatures that are wired to survive. It's incredible the depths that we can go to survive. But in the aftermath of it, when your nervous system is fried and at every corner you think it's gonna happen again, ow, 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 ow. When Severus died, sobbed. When Draco sent the house elf away without saying goodbye, oh my god. Ow. And the way that, like, Hermione and Draco tortured themselves for the sake of saving each other was so painful. And where a little bit of my criticisms come into place, because this, like, savior complex that Hermione had was honestly super annoying by the end of the book. Because at the end of the day, Draco was the High Reeve. Draco was somebody who killed a lot of people, and it was giving me, like, Nazis fleeing to different countries to escape being executed kind of vibes. Because it doesn't really matter that he was an active member of the Order there at the end and helped defeat Voldemort by killing, like, Umbridge and destroying that last Horcrux. It doesn't matter that he saved a bunch of people from the prisons and whatever. He still killed so many people. It doesn't matter that he killed them quickly. He still did it. And it made me uncomfortable a little bit, the way that she just constantly defended this person who, despite the fact that he had gone through a lot and had been in highly abusive situations because of Voldemort and his parents, he still made decisions to murder a lot of people and do horrible, horrible things. And it's like, it's this weird tension of, I've watched a lot of people in my own life use their own abuse as an excuse for doing horrible things. And it is no excuse. Because you always have the choice to do something better. You always have the choice to not be an asshole and not harm others. You have the choice to feel your own feelings and recognize that that uncomfortable feeling that you're feeling in your body that makes you want to lash out and hurt somebody else is something that you actually do have control over. Like, you do have control over the way that you react to your feelings. And I think that it kind of glanced over that a little bit in this book, where I found myself just kind of feeling like, ugh, I don't really want Draco to survive. Like, I know Hermione loves him, but, like, leave him behind, boo. You're gonna be better off. But this weird attachment and this weird obsession and this kind of codependent story that we saw Hermione fall into made me uncomfortable. But with that small criticism, I'll be honest, like, overall the book was great. I don't think I've read a book in so long that made me feel so deeply. And I know that every day I wake up thinking about how Hermione was not recognized as an active Order of the Phoenix, or not recognized as an active member of the Order of the Phoenix. My heart breaks still a little bit thinking about it. And I am interested to see how the impact of this story will play out over the next several weeks. Because, I mean, I did finish it, like, Saturday. I finished this book Saturday, and it's currently Tuesday. So I've been sitting with it for a few days, and I still think about it every day. And when people said that this book was heartbreaking, I was scared to read it. And I didn't understand what they meant. I thought, like, oh, someone's gonna die. You know, it's just gonna be like one of the main character dies. No, it's just because it's like 800 pages of pain. And I don't know. I don't know if it's like torture porn kind of pain, where it's like, oh yeah, I'm reading this to like poke a wound, or I'm reading this to rip open something to make it stronger. I want to look at it that way because it feels a little more empowering. But I'm also not actively seeking another book like that anytime soon. And it was, I don't know, it was a lot. It was honest. It was a lot. And it brings me back to this, like, it brings me back to kind of what I was trying to say at the beginning of this video, like establishing hobbies and establishing a sense of self through stories and through the media that we consume. It's really important to consume things that help us build a worldview that we want to see. If we are really thinking about themes of liberation and freedom, what kind of content are we watching that helps prime the way for that? What kind of things are we consuming that are helping us become the best versions of ourselves? As we grow as people, and as many of you might be establishing senses of self and figuring out what your hobbies are and what you enjoy, ask yourself what kind of people you want to be. And books have always been something that have been like an oracle for me. I think for a period of time I was reading a lot of nonfiction books that were more religiously inclined because that's what I was interested in and that's what I needed to see and feel, because during this height of my spiritual awakening, I was really into like learning a lot about all of the different ways that you could have a relationship with the divine, because I had been so jaded by the evangelical church telling you that there's only one way you can experience God. And I just knew like in the core of my being that that wasn't true. And I wanted to experience different perspectives to see what I feel for myself. And now through reading fiction books, I'm reading about different worlds and different places that people and characters live, almost as a way to discern what kind of world I want to live in and what kind of world I want to build for myself and the community members that I would like to eventually surround myself with. And I think it's really powerful. Propaganda is something that our government uses in forms of media. Like, pretty much all of our news outlets are propagandized, as well as things like Netflix and Hulu, and the content that's being created on there is not necessarily rooted in evil, but it is interesting how these stories that are being released that have propaganda fingers in them and the way that that is shaping the way that people see the world. Having been somebody who has stopped watching the news for a long time, I see the way that I have changed as a result of not watching the news anymore, of not participating in the narrative of whatever is being pushed out there. And I'm not necessarily saying that I'm better than you, but I'm better than you. No, I'm just kidding. But it's just, like, propaganda is a slippery slope. It is a sticky bitch. It is something that honestly has its fingers in all of us. And I don't think it's something to feel ashamed of, but I think that the way that we can start to break free from oppressive forces like our government is to establish who we are and find out who we are through hobbies and finding what makes you happy and doing things that bring you joy and don't necessarily tick a box of productivity. It's not always about making money. It's not always about being the most productive person ever. Sometimes it really is as simple as just learning how to enjoy the life that you have been given and find joy in the moments around you. What kind of hobbies do you participate in that bring you closer to who you feel like you want to be? And I'm still answering that question for myself. Through doing crocheting and knitting, I found a way to create and use my creative energy that didn't have the pressure of monetization behind it, which helped open me up to creating different things within the mediums that I've chosen that do monetize very easily, like jewelry. Like through learning how to engrave, being something just super fun and new and interesting to learn, I've expanded so much in understanding how my creative energy works and what kind of things I want to be making in this world, not just something that I feel like I should be making so that I can make money. And then along with that, telling myself new stories. Like, yes, I'm reading a lot of fiction. Yes, it's a lot of fun. Yes, it's fantasy. And maybe it's not even deeper than that. Maybe it's just on the surface level, a place where I can escape for a while and have some fun. And that alone is totally valid and not harmful, and something that I think is important for a lot of us to have. Like, healthy coping mechanisms are super good and helpful. And if you need to escape into a fantasy book for a little while, you're, first of all, escaping somewhere fun. You're having fun. And second of all, through just the act of reading, you're helping your neuroplasticity. You are helping your brain stay strong and healthy, hopefully for a long time. Like longevity is something that I think a lot about, and the way that we feed ourselves and fuel our minds and our bodies and our spirits. And I think reading, even if it's just trashy smut novels, is helping your brain stay elastic to hopefully last and have a longer health span. Because it's one thing to live a long time, but if you're mentally ill for most of that time, like how much fun are you really having? If you have severe Alzheimer's because of the choices that you made to not strengthen your body and strengthen your mind and consume things that are like helping you in life, you're not going to have a long health span. And I think reading is something that helps your brain stay active and stay healthy for a longer amount of time. As well as helps you build worlds, helps you access the imagination realm and imagination space that helps build the world around you to see the kind of reality that you want to live. I've talked for a long time. I didn't realize I've been just yapping for an hour about books. But if you haven't read a book in a long time, I encourage you to try. If you're somebody who has a hard time reading because you're dyslexic, that's valid. It's totally valid. I don't want to sit here and shame people who can't read the same way that others can because of a disability. Reading through audiobooks is totally valid. Audiobooks are great. I myself participate in reading audiobooks or listening to audiobooks. I was able to read over 40 books last year because I listened to about half of them as audiobooks. And you're still consuming the story. There's something about oral storytelling that is a callback to the ancestors, a callback to the ancient part of ourselves, because before we could even read and write, people have been telling stories and passing them down verbally. And so I feel like audiobooks is kind of a continuation of that tradition, and is a totally valid way to consume a story. Even if you're not dyslexic and if you don't have a reading disability, listening to audiobooks is totally valid and something I encourage you to participate in. You can do things like Audible, kind of expensive in the long run, but if you have the means, like by all means, do your thing. Libby. If you have access to your public library, and if they have a Libby kind of thing set up, I have read and listened to so many books for free through that service. It is amazing. I have the privilege of living in a big city though, so I understand that smaller communities might not have that resource. I don't know. Check into your local library and see what they have. I think you'll be surprised at the services that they provide. So yeah, I don't really know what else to say. I've been really chewing on this. I've been wanting to talk about Manacled since I finished it. So if you want to read Manacled, please, by all means do. You can get it on AO3. Shinlin. I should really know how to say that. This person, the gal who wrote it, is actually about to publish it as a different story. Similar like themes and concepts, but she's making it from a fan fiction into an original book, Alchemize. It's coming out next year. So it will not be on AO3 for much longer. If you would like to read it, that is a place that you can go. Oh, an archive of our own. Just type into Google Manacled, Shinlin Yu, and Hermione fanfic, and it should pop up, and you can download it as an EPUB or a Mobi and read it on your Kindle. That's how I did it. I can't remember which file I downloaded it as, but I will be saving that PDF. I will be saving that on a thumb drive forever to read as the fanfic, and then supporting her monetarily when the book comes out, because she's changed my life. And just the impact of story in general is something that I feel very passionate about. And I think that if you're feeling like you need to tell yourself a new story, something as simple as like reading a book is something that can help you learn how to world build and how to start telling yourself different stories. Because the thing is, we're all constantly telling ourselves different stories about who we are and what we can and can't do all the fucking time. And we can rewrite them at any minute. Like literally, you can sit down and write a story in a book, on your laptop, whatever it is. Just sit down and open a Word document and start writing what you want the world to look like. And I think that you'll be amazed at how fast things change. This has been a practice that I've started this year. I started creative writing a little bit more, and writing from the perspective of the outcome has already occurred and how I feel about it has changed in the moment how I feel about whatever it is, like whatever goal I'm going after. Helps me settle into the present moment a lot more, because there is a version of you who has the thing that you already desire, and it's just like the magnetization of you catching up to that, because time is not linear. Time is the cyclical thing that is more like a mesh basket than anything else, but we perceive it through linear time, through our social constructs, and it is what it is. I think this is like a deeply rooted thing. I don't know if even we have the ability to perceive time beyond its linear nature as human beings. I can intuit that there's something cyclical about it, but I can't experience it. I can't just jump to the end, you know? So I think that's something to contemplate. But through story and storytelling, we have the ability to access these different timelines and these different places within ourselves to help call them into our reality. And it's super powerful. And it's like our magical system is on this place that we call Earth. And it's really exciting and really interesting, and something that I spend a lot of time thinking about. So here we are expressing that. Yeah. If you liked listening to me follow along, subscribe, give me a thumbs up if you like this video, leave a comment telling me what you think. If you feel interested in looking at my art, my Instagram is basically a running portfolio. If you want to custom order, send me an email. Want to follow me on social medias, you certainly can. I have TikTok and Instagram, link down below. I also have the link to my website down below if you want to see my jewelry and support. Everything is handmade. Right now I'm living in Phoenix, Arizona, so everything has been made in Phoenix, Arizona for as long as I have been making and selling jewelry as an adult. So yeah, follow along if you want. If not, that's totally fine. Until next time, my friends, have a good life. I hope you do things that bring you joy and establish hobbies that help you feel closer to yourself. Bye.